Welcome in, everybody, to our first Dynasty Rankings video. We are ranking receivers in today's video. I have 7 tiers of receivers, 58 receivers total. I know that's a random number, but these were the 58 receivers that I kind of fit into these 7 different tiers. I'm excited to bring this video for you today. Again, Dynasty wide receiver rankings. It is currently Saturday, February 10th. I don't know why I said 20, February 10th. That means the Super Bowl is tomorrow. So this is rankings for the 2023 offseason / 2024 season. Again, Super Bowl is tomorrow. So the offseason's here. Free agency will be upon us. The draft before we know it. It's exciting times for Dynasty football. And we're just going to jump right into it. Here, it doesn't really matter if you do half PPR, full PPR. I know there's a big divide on what's the best, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't really matter to me when it comes to Dynasty in terms of ranking these guys. So let me fix my screen here a little bit just so I can get out of the way. There we are. There you see it. 7 tiers of players. These don't include rookies, by the way. We're not going to do that until we get at least some draft spots and Dynasty rookie draft starting up. Maybe I'll mention a couple rookies here and there and where they might go. But we're just going to jump right into it again with the tier 1. I got this nice list. I chose this tier list just because I like the pictures and the names and everything. There are some duplicates. There are some receivers I'm not using here. And there's, I think, 3 receivers that actually make my top 58 that are not pictured here. So without further ado, let's get into it with tier 1. And no surprise, last year at this time, we had 2 players that were in the tier 1. That was Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. They are, to me, still in tier 1. No reason to move them out of it. And I think there's one more that deserves to be in there, and that is CeeDee Lamb. All 3 very young. Jefferson and Lamb have been in the league since 2020. Jamar Chase is 2021. All still very, very young. All have put up dominant fantasy seasons. All have the draft capital behind them. And to me, you can make an argument as who you would take as wide receiver 1. Now, 7 times out of 10, it's probably going to be Justin Jefferson. But again, you can make an argument for Jamar Chase. The argument for Jamar Chase is, well, he probably has the highest quarterback play over the next several years out of the 3, right? Joe Burrow over Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow over Kirk Cousins, and we don't even know if Kirk Cousins is going to be back on the Vikings. The argument for CeeDee Lamb is, hey, he just put up the best season that any of these players have had in their careers in terms of fantasy football. Last year in 2023, CeeDee Lamb, points per game, outscored any season Jefferson's had, any season that Chase has had. So there's an argument for these 3 players. Now, again, I'm not going to rank them too much within the tier. Do I have an opinion about who I prefer over the other? Of course I do. For most players, I probably prefer Jefferson over the 3. But to me, it's kind of pointless. That's why you put things in tiers. It's kind of pointless to argue this player over this player strongly. And to me, if I have Justin Jefferson, but someone's willing to offer me CeeDee Lamb and a second-round pick, I'm going to take it. If I can get something on top of another receiver and I'm moving in the same tier, staying in the same tier, I'm going to take that like 10 times out of 10. So that's what the tiers are here for, especially for Dynasty football. I think they're pretty important. Next up on the list, we got tier 2, just another tier of 3 players, in my opinion. A couple players that have proven multiple seasons that they are studs. These are all young players, by the way. Amon-Ra St. Brown is still quite young. A.J. Brown, I believe, is 26 years old. He is 26 years old. This will be his 27-year-old season. St. Brown, he is 25 years old. He'll turn 24 years old. He'll turn 25 in the next year. In the middle of the next year. And then we have one more, in my opinion, that deserves to be on here, and that's Puka Nacua. So these are all guys that, to me, they've had monster seasons. They're still relatively young, but they just fall short of tier 1. To me, you can't make an argument of, like, for example, Amon-Ra St. Brown over any of those other receivers in tier 1, in my opinion, unless you're kind of a biased Super Lions fan, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown has had a great start to his career. It's not like Justin Jefferson's start to his career. Amon-Ra St. Brown, his quarterback play is not as good as Jamar Chase's, sorry. Amon-Ra St. Brown has not had a season quite like CeeDee Lamb. So there's just not really an argument here, but still love the guy. Still think he's awesome. A.J. Brown. Now, I will say this. A.J. Brown in 2022, his first year with the Eagles, put up a monster season, 1,400 yards. This last year, A.J. Brown was on pace for like 1,900 yards. He was on pace for a monster season. Remember, he had like 5 straight games or 6 straight games of 120 yards and a touchdown. And then he just completely fell off. It kind of went perfectly in line with this Eagles season. I don't know what happened. I really don't know. Was it the offensive coordinator? Was it Jalen Hurts? I don't know. But if he had finished out the season like he was on pace for it, to me, he would have been in tier 1. But he didn't. So I'm still putting him in tier 2. Still think he's a really good player. He's one of my favorite players to watch in football. And he has been since he's been on the Titans. Also, kind of a notch in his belt. We've seen him do it with 2 different quarterbacks, 2 different systems, the Titans and the Eagles, and he's been pretty dominant in both. And then we have Puka Nacua. The guy had an amazing rookie year. Do you want to call it the best ever? That's up to you to argue. Yeah, I know he had an extra game. It was still a monster season in terms of catches and yards. So Puka Nacua, I think, deserves to be in this tier 2 as well. And also, we do have to take into account perceived market value of guys. That comes into play with Dynasty. Whether you like a guy or not a little bit more, if the market, if the keep trade cut rankings, whatever rankings you look at, if the market is very high on them, you got to take that into account because that means you can get a lot for them in a trade. So tier 3 is our next tier. And we are expanding a little bit here in terms of how many are in this tier. To me, so there's a couple different types of players in this tier. One of them, he's kind of a unicorn in this tier. It is Tyreek Hill. Can you make the argument for Tyreek Hill being in tier 2? Sure. I'm not going to argue against that. The dude is awesome. The only thing to me that's kind of holding him back is the age. You know, we essentially, according to him, have 2 more years of Tyreek Hill. However, they are 2 years of potentially wide receiver 1 overall potential. So I do think sometimes we exaggerate dynasty in the sense of like, oh, you got a plan for 3, 4, 5 years in the future. And from my point of view, I don't look much further out than 2-3 years to a certain extent when it comes to things, because things can just change so much in terms of falling and rising and injuries and all that stuff. So, you know, I think it's slightly overrated that people, if you're lower on him, you know, he's going to retire in 2 years. Yeah, but he's going to give you potentially 2 years of wide receiver 1 potential. Again, if you want to put him in tier 2, I'm fine with that because I think he's that good. I'm just going to put him in tier 3 here. We do still have to take age into consideration. I do think, again, we overrate age as well. I'll kind of get into that later on in the video. That how we can kind of overrate age and just kind of like we boost people up strictly because of age. So Tyreek Hill is kind of the unicorn in this tier. And then we have a couple, 3, I would say, young players, in my opinion, high draft capital guys. Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, all first-round picks, all top 12 picks, I believe. Was Olave? Olave was like 12, 13. Garrett Wilson and Waddle, I believe, are both top 10. 3 guys who have the draft capital, are young, and have produced. Now, do they have difference-making seasons like A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, or even Puka? No. I know Waddle is probably the closest there. He had a big year in 2022. It's kind of banged up this last year. We do have to kind of cap Waddle a little bit because he is with Tyreek Hill, and we have to take that into account a little bit for the next 2 years. But these are 3 players that are awesome. I could see them easily moving up into tier 2 this as early as this year. If they have big years, they're going to move up into tier 2 because of the draft capital, because of their age. So all of them have produced. All of them have showed something. Garrett Wilson and Olave, I believe, both back-to-back 1,000-yard years. Maybe Olave just fell short of that. And then Waddle, I think, has had either 2 or 3 straight 1,000-yard years. So, yeah, Olave, back-to-back 1,000-yard years. Garrett Wilson has had that, and Waddle has had 3 straight. So these guys have proven it. They just haven't had the elite difference-making years yet, but I do think they will. So those are another group here. And then we have I have 2 more guys actually in this tier, and that's 2 guys that are a little bit older than Garrett Wilson, Waddle, Olave, but younger than Tyreek Hill. So they're still relatively young. I think DJ Moore will be playing in his year 26 or 27 season. Let me just double check that real quick. DJ Moore is 26. He'll be 27 this coming year. Brandon Ayuk, I believe, will be 26. So still relatively young players who can be very good for the next 3 years, who just had really big seasons, over 1,300 yards and kind of difference-making years, in my opinion. Both Brandon Ayuk and DJ Moore, I think they're both in the top 10, I believe, per game. I think DJ Moore finished 6th overall, but I put them a step below guys like St. Brown, AJ Brown, because I want to see them do it one more time, right? I want to see them do it one more time. And now I know Puka's only done it once, but it was his rookie year, right? DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, if they have another season of 1,400 yards, I can see them moving up into tier 2. So that's my tier 3 list there. We got six guys. Now we get into tier 4, and these tiers start to get pretty big, in my opinion. I'm going to start off with a player that I think is kind of a unicorn in this group, and that is Nico Collins, who had a monster year with CJ Stroud. I think he had over 1,300 yards missing 2 games, I believe. Just double checking that. He had... I'm looking at CJ Stroud. I'm looking at, I need to look at Nico Collins. Nico Collins in 2023 had 1,300 yards, 8 touchdowns. He missed 2 games. So he had a huge year, 80 catches. The reason why you can kind of relate him a little bit to DJ Moore and Brandon Ayuk. Now, the difference between, I think, Nico Collins and those guys is we've seen good play from DJ Moore and Ayuk, just not difference-making play until last year. But we've seen 1,000 yards from DJ Moore before, or 1,000 yards from Brandon Ayuk. Nico Collins, we didn't see anything his first 2 years. Not blaming that on him necessarily. It could have been the offense, the Texans, just a bad team. Maybe he was a 3rd-round pick, so maybe he just needed a couple years to develop. But, this was his only season of production we've seen, so that's why I put him just below guys like DJ Moore and Ayuk, but he is on that fringe. I can see him easily being tier 3. Also have to take into account it could be his last year with the Texans, and so that does come into play a little bit, because I think some of his value is that he's tied to CJ Stroud. So Nico Collins to me is in this group. And then we have a couple guys here. Kind of another unicorn, actually, in my opinion, is Michael Pittman. I believe he belongs in here. I think he's underrated a bit. I think Keep Trade Cut has him more as like a close to top 20. Yeah, they have one wide receiver 17. I'm closer to like Michael Pittman. Yeah, I'm right around there actually as like a wide receiver 17. But to me, Michael Pittman, does he have like top 5 wide receiver potential like Puka, AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, potentially, Garrett Wilson, Waddle, Olave? I don't think so, which is why I put him in this tier. I just think he's going to be a really good top 15, top 12 player, even with Anthony Richardson for the next several years. So I put Michael Pittman in there. And then we have 2 guys, in my opinion, that are slightly capped because they're kind of the wide receiver 2s on their team. Devontae Smith and T. Higgins. Both young players, both have been top 12 receivers. Both are really, really good. If Devontae Smith was the only receiver in Philly, I think he could possibly be like a tier 3 guy. But you got to account for AJ Brown being there at least another year or 2. T. Higgins, I think, is going to go back to the Bengals, so Jamar Chase kind of caps him a little bit. So that's why I have these guys there. And then we have a large group of young players who have shown potential, most of them rookies. Tank Dell, Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice, Jordan Addison, all rookies this last year who had really good rookie years. Tank Dell, if he stayed healthy and you take out the couple of games where he left like right in the beginning, dude was on pace for like 1,400 yards. We'd be talking about him along with Puka Nacua. Zay Flowers had an awesome year. Rashee Rice was the best receiver for the Chiefs. Jordan Addison had over 900 yards. All rookie receivers that you're really excited about because of the seasons that they had. But did they have Puka Nacua-like years? No. So we got to cap them just a little bit. They didn't. And did they even have Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave years? Not quite. I still put Jackson Smith and Jigba in this list. Still think he is was the best receiver prospect in this draft. Will he be the best receiver? Time will tell. Still think he's really good. Still think you should buy low on him if you can. And I still think he has the potential to be the best receiver in this draft class. And then another guy who's not a rookie, but Drake London, he's shown his potential, has been on really, really tough situations, but he's still kind of accounting for like 30% of the team's passing offense. So I like that. So if you just get an uptick, a better quarterback, something, we've seen now back-to-back essentially 900-yard seasons. The touchdowns are lacking, which is a little concerning. But again, this team's not really throwing that many touchdowns with Heineke and Ritter and Mariota. So Drake London, I kind of group him together with the Zay Flowers, the Rashee Rice, these rookies that have really good seasons. I can see Drake London still being a top-tier receiver, and he has the draft capital. I believe, let me just double check, that is it for my tier 4. It is. Next, we have tier 5. And, one guy that's kind of the unicorn in this tier is DK Metcalf. I just don't think DK Metcalf, the middle of the first 8 weeks of the 2020 season, go back and look at DK Metcalf's numbers. I think he was the dynasty receiver number 1 at that point. And he's never lived up to that type of season the last couple years. I think we've seen him more as like a top 15, 18-ish receiver, not a top 10, top 7 receiver. I think over the last 3 years, he's finished top 12 per game, like top 18 and like top 15 or something. I just think that's who he is. He's not a high volume guy. He's not going to catch 90, 100 passes, in my opinion. And so I think we know what we get with DK. He's a good receiver. He's still young. He's probably going to be the best receiver on his team next year. And he's probably going to finish top 15, 17-ish. People will argue for him to be a tier 4, the people that love DK Metcalf. I don't know. I just don't see it necessarily. But I'm not going to argue too hard if you do want to put him in that tier 4. So he's kind of the unicorn of this tier, in my opinion. The next group of guys that we have are older guys who, to me, can still have top 5 seasons. Is it likely? Maybe not. Is it risky? Possibly, but you can find value here, in my opinion. We're talking guys like Deebo Samuel. I know it may strike people a little like Deebo Samuel old. Well, I mean, he'll be 29. No, he just turned 28. So he's not like super. He's a little bit of a unicorn in this group. He just turned 28. I think he has multiple seasons still, but still kind of like in that range of like old-ish guys who have, you can't really look past a couple years on them, but they still have like top 5 receiver potential, in my opinion. Devontae Adams is in this group, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, and Mike Evans. All receivers who I'm not going to be super shocked if Keenan Allen's a top 5 receiver. He was this last year per game. Cooper Kupp, I'm not going to be surprised if, he was just kind of battling injuries all year, if he has a top 10 season next year. Same with Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, who I know was disappointing, Mike Evans, who I think had a top 5 season last year anyways. So all older guys who, if I have as a contending team, I'm happy. I'll keep them. They could be big pieces in my championship run in 2024. If I have as a rebuilding team, I probably want to move off of them. However, if I'm a contending team that wants one of these guys, I don't want to buy them right now. I want to buy them in October when I know they're doing well and I can add them to my championship run, assuming I'm on one, right? So is there risk in these guys? Of course. Could they just fall off a cliff? Of course. They're at that age cliff number, 30 years old, all of them except for Deebo. I think they're all 30 or older. So, there's concern with injuries and just kind of falling off the cliff. However, no one's going to be shocked if any one of these receivers here are going to have top 5-ish seasons. And then we have 2 more guys here. Actually, I'm going to throw Terry McLaurin's in there as well, in my opinion, in this tier. He should be talked along as with the older guys. Now, I don't necessarily think he can have a top 5 season, which makes him a little different here. He's kind of fringe tier 5, tier 6 to me. but I do think he could be a top 12 receiver. We've just seen it in 2022, I believe, or was it 2021, of him being like a top 12 receiver. If they just get better offensive system, which they should this year, and a good quarterback in there, I think Terry McLaurin can have a really, really good season. So I kind of group him in with those old guys. And then we have two guys, younger guys here who have a lot of potential, George Pickens and Jaden Reed. Now, I think a lot of people are going to argue for George Pickens being in this tier 4 because he just had like 1,100 yards. You know, he had a better season than, Zay Flowers or Rashee Rice or any of these rookie receivers. He's only a second-year guy. And, he's even had, I believe, in terms of yards, a better season than Michael Pittman, or he's like right there with Michael Pittman. Maybe my bias is showing a little bit. I'm not a huge George Pickens fan. His style of play, because he's not going to catch a lot of passes. At least that's what he's shown the first 2 years. He led the league in yards per reception this year. And you just go back and look at since 2000, receivers to lead the league in yards per, or have over 18 yards per catch and over 1,000 yards. And there's not many receivers that repeat it. Now, the one guy you can point to that did it consistently and was like a nice fantasy player was Vincent Jackson for the Chargers and Bucks back in the the early 2010s. He did it like 4 or 5 times, but he was never like a dominant receiver. I just don't know if Pickens is ever going to be that type of player. He's going to be a 70 catch guy, a fringe 1,000 yard, 1,100 yard guy. If he has a big touchdown year, great. But he kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Devontae Parker in that way, where like Devontae Parker has talent. He has a role in an offense. And can he have a season like Devontae Parker did back in like 2018 or whenever it was? Yeah. And Pickens had that season last year. So if Pickens does it again or becomes a little bit more of a high volume catch guy or a touchdown guy, then I'll bump him up. But as of right now, I like him in tier 5. Jaden Reed, he was a rookie last year. He didn't quite get to the rookie numbers of like an Addison, Rashee Rice, Tank Dell, or he doesn't have the draft capital behind him like JSN. So that's why he's in this tier 5. But would I be surprised if Jaden Reed is a really good receiver, a top 24 receiver next year? No. So that's why I have him in my tier 5. I believe that is it for tier 5. That is tier 6 coming up here, guys. We have another tier of a lot of players. And we're going to start off with, again, old guys here who I don't think they can get quite to the levels of Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp. These are like Hall of Fame, top 5 receiver they've had in the past, top 5 receiver numbers, wide receiver 1 overall numbers potentially on some of them. These are guys who are older, but I don't think they can get to that level. Guys like Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown, even a Mike Williams, a Tyler Lockett. I think these guys, they're all older. Should we look past 2024 on them? Probably not. Tyler Lockett was even like, should I have him in tier 6? I don't know. I ended up doing it just because, it wasn't that long ago, 2022, where he was like top 12 overall receiver. So these are all guys who are older. They still have a year or multiple years. You could throw Christian Kirk in here too. Now, Christian Kirk's a little different. He's not quite as old as those other guys. Just double checking. I believe he'll be playing mostly a year 27. So he's a little different from those guys, but kind of in the same boat of like older-ish receivers who have 1 to 3 more years of like just being like a top 20, 24 receiver, good fantasy pieces, but not league-winning pieces, not ultimate difference-making pieces. So, Amari Cooper is probably going to finish as like a top 20 receiver next year. He's been doing it every year. Chris Godwin can bounce back a little bit. He still had 1,000 yards this last year. If he gets on maybe a different team with a little bit better quarterback or passing game, I can see him having a top 24 season. Calvin Ridley, I know a lot of people were disappointed by him. He still had over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. It was very boom bust like, but he was also coming off of almost 2 years of missing football. Like maybe he has his feet under him a little bit, gets to a good team. I don't think he's back with Jacksonville. I could see him being a top 24 guy. Deontay Johnson has always been a heavy pass volume guy. If they get a better quarterback in there, Deontay Johnson could have a good season. DeAndre Hopkins, like he's like, I think the oldest of this group, so probably the riskiest here. But, still, again, on Tennessee, who didn't have a great passing offense, had 75 catches, 1,050 yards, and 7 touchdowns. You get him on a team with a little bit better quarterback or passing volume, DeAndre Hopkins is going to have one more good year. Marquise Brown is still pretty young. He's younger than Christian Kirk, I believe. Can he be reunite back with Kyler or, get on like a team like the Chiefs or something? Mike Williams, we've seen if he's healthy per game, can still be a difference maker. He was still averaging like 13 points a game the last couple of years. He just gets injured all the time. Can he just have one healthy season where I think if he does, he's a top 20 receiver? And then Tyler Lockett, we talked about. Christian Kirk, we talked about. This is where I think you can really start finding a lot of value in players. And where this is where we start to take age a little bit too over the top, in my opinion. For example, a guy like Josh Downs is ranked ahead of guys like Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, Deontay Johnson. And to me, that's just ridiculous. And the only reason he's ranked that high is because of his age. Now, can Josh Downs turn into a good player? Yes. Is it likely that he ever has a season that these guys have had, their top seasons in the past? I think it's very unlikely that he gets there. So I'll take 1 year of Keenan Allen over the big risk on Josh Downs being a top 12, top 15 receiver. Because I think it's more likely, way more likely that, Amari Cooper or Deontay Johnson have a top 15 season than it is Josh Downs. And so even if it's just 1 or 2 years, I'll take that value in production, because if I'm contending, it's going to help me win a championship. If I'm not contending, I can trade him for a lot more than what I can probably get Josh Downs. I can trade Amari Cooper having a top 15 season, rather than more than what I could trade Josh Downs, who's maybe having a top 36 season. So, I'm just using Josh Downs as a name. It's not like I hate the guy. He is, I believe, in my top 58 here. So that's most of the group here. We have 2 more in this group, and it's actually 3 guys, 3 more guys in this group, and that is Christian Watson, Jameson Williams, and Jahan Dotson. Now, what do all these 3 players have in common? 1, they're all young. They've all played 2 seasons, or, they're entering their 3rd year in the NFL. 2, they have some draft capital behind them. Jameson and Jahan Dotson were both first-round picks. Christian Watson was a very highly drafted second-round pick. And 3, they've all shown something, a flash. Christian Watson in his rookie year had a 3-4 week stretch of really good play. Jameson Williams this year has flashed at times of his ability, and he's on a really good offense. Jahan Dotson was being drafted very highly in redraft and dynasty heading into 2023 because of what he flashed in 2022. So that's what they have in common. 3 young receivers who have flashed and have the draft capital behind them. I'll throw them into tier 6. And then we get into the final tier here, guys. We're going to start off with 4 guys who they're kind of not the opposite of Christian Watson and Williams and Dotson. They're similar in that they're young and have the draft capital, but they missing the flashing part, right? They're missing the part where they're flashing. So Quentin Johnston, I know the likelihood of him being good is pretty low, but we still have to recognize he's on a good offense with a good quarterback, and he was a first-round pick. So I'm not ready to just completely say he's dead. There's still some hope there, right? They're going to try and make it work with him. That's the biggest thing. They're going to give him the opportunity, most likely. Jonathan Mingo, another guy that I don't have a lot of hope for, but there's something to say about a team taking him, in the top 40 of the NFL draft, and being hopefully on a better offense if Canales can turn that team around. Marvin Mims, another guy that I kind of was excited about because Sean Payton traded up to draft him. I think he's a Sean Payton guy. I think he has that potential to be a pretty solid player. Treylon Burks is another one. Like, people are going to ask, what's the difference between Treylon Burks and Sky Moore, who were both drafted 2 years ago and have done nothing in 2 years? Well, Treylon Burks, one, he's a first-round pick. Two, a lot of it's due to his injury stuff, which, is part of it. You need to stay healthy. But Sky Moore, the Chiefs are basically saying, like, no thanks. We're better without you. Like, we're benching you, and our offense is better. Whereas Treylon Burks, there's still a little bit of potential there. And Josh Downs is another guy here. Oh, and I'd throw Michael Wilson in there too, a guy that I just kind of like. All rookie receivers, not rookies, but all young players. I think all of them, but Treylon Burks are rookies who have a little bit of draft capital behind them. Not so much with Michael Wilson, but they have some draft capital behind them, and I like them. Could they easily just fall into nothingness after this year? Of course. Could they bump up to like a tier 6 or 5? Sure, depending on what they do this year. Next up on the list here, I'm just double checking. So we have some players again. I'm going to throw some players in here that are just like, to me, Wan'Dale Robinson, Romeo Doubs, Gabe Davis, Cortland Sutton, and Jacoby Myers. These are all players who, some of them are young, some of them are older. Essentially what I'm trying to say is I think these guys can be flex in deeper leagues, spot starters during bye weeks type of players. That's kind of where they're at now. And there's actually 3 more on the list that aren't pictured here. Jerry Jeudy I'm going to throw in here too. He's kind of a combination of like, there's still slight potential there. Like we've seen a 900-yard season from Jerry Jeudy, and like he was obviously a high draft pick. So there's slight potential, but I do think at worst, he's probably like a spot starter during bye weeks. 3 more players like that that are kind of on the younger side that don't have the draft capital that I'm excited about. Dontavian Wicks, Khalil Shakir, and Demario Douglas. I don't have their pictures here, which is why they're not going up. But I would put them in this tier 7 of young players that don't quite have the draft capital of other players. I think they were all 5th round picks, I believe, 6th round picks. But they showed a little something last year, and I think they could just be solid flex players in deeper leagues or spot starters during a bye week. So that rounds out my top 58 receivers. I know it's a weird number. There could be other names that maybe you're thinking about. Why aren't they here? A guy like a Rashid Shaheed, a Jalen Hyatt, and I don't know, Trey Palmer. There's a couple other guys that I do like and I do see potential, but I can't just make a list go on forever, right? Like A.T. Perry, I kind of like, but I'm not going to put him in my top 58 yet. Would I be surprised if he gets there? No. Those other guys I mentioned, like the Hyatt and Rashid Shaheed, in like a lineup league, which is what I'm kind of approaching this from, not a best ball. It's just really hard to start those guys. I just don't know when you're ever going to be able to rely on a guy like Rashid Shaheed or a Jalen Hyatt. So that's my list. I don't expect you to agree with all of them. Let me know in the comments what you think, and we can have an open discussion about it, right? We can have a constructive criticism. We can talk and see. We can debate. We can be cordial about it. I love debating and talking fantasy football. So let me know in the comments what you think, if you would change things around, move guys from one tier to another. But yeah, that is all I have for you guys today. As always, please like and subscribe. We'll be back doing some running back rankings in the next video, and we'll catch you guys next time.